Okay, this week's episode is really refreshing. I'm really excited we had Matthew Pifer on. He's an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, about 10 years into practice. He's out of Santa Barbara, California. Poor guy having to live out in Santa Barbara. He's getting by. I guess he was a little traffic with Prince Harry and Meghan, but was able to make it to the interview after all. But really, really a down-to-earth guy. And what I really like is his social media approach, and really in the way in which he talks and educates his patients in a way in which they can truly understand. Again, really refreshing episode. Matt's a great guy. I think everyone's going to really enjoy this one. Sit back and enjoy. Don't forget about the YouTube channel as well. Dr. Scott Sigman, hashtag follow the pro.
From Medical Media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello, world. Dr. Scott Sigman, your favorite opioid-sparing orthopedic surgeon, here for another episode of the Ortho Show podcast, where, yes, everyone knows we bring you the best of the best in orthopedics. We are going West Coast today, out to Santa Barbara, to Matthew Pifer, who's an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist in private practice in Santa Barbara. We got to hang out a little bit at Shoulder 360 down in Miami, and we just thought it would be a great idea to bring you on. Matt, what a pleasure it is to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me. I love it.
No, it's great, man. You put on an outstanding conversation and lecture at Shoulder 360 about social media, and we know you did a great job because you gave a huge shout out to the Ortho Show. So we thank you very much.
You guys had your own slide. That's how much you're slaying it, killing it, and entertaining the world and educating. So I figured you deserved it.
No, that was very kind of you. It really was, and greatly appreciated for sure. So listen, man, we always like to start at the beginning. And what's great about the Ortho Show, we bring on, so many different orthopedic surgeons or people in industry, all different ages, different layers, times in their career. So this is great to have someone. What are you in the first 10 years of your practice at this point? How long you been in?
Yeah, that's about right. I think 9 years. I think I got out of fellowship at 13 or 14 back in the day. So
yeah, all right. So
that 10-year mark.
You got some gray hairs in the beard there, so we love it. But all right, let's talk about where it started. Okay, born and bred. Where are you from? Are you the only doctor in the family? What was your motivation? Tell us about all that when you were growing up.
Yeah, so I'm a farm boy from Ohio. So literally the middle of nowhere, farm country. When I woke up in the morning, I opened the door and I looked at a farm cornfield, and I had woods in the back. So small town, Ohio. Pops worked for GM in military. My mom was a housewife, typical Midwestern wife there. So that's where it all started. And I think my dad would always have me help build garages, barns, do all the handy stuff around the house from a young age. So that's when I had affinity and love for power tools to look at me now. So if I had to say one of the reasons it happened, it may have started back in the day then. But so that's where it started.
I love it. So that hands-on, process of using your hands and your eyes and building stuff, very similar to sort of what we do in some of the ways in orthopedics. So then it's off to Ashland University, where you're a Division II football player. You're a starter for 4 years, and we do our homework here. One of the all-time scoring leaders. What was the position? Tell us what was going on there, brother.
So yeah, man, you dug the dirt and you found it. So my former life back in the day, I actually grew up playing a lot of soccer, and I was a striker, and I had a really hard kick, and I ended up, playing all sports. There probably wasn't a sport I didn't play, but I could really kick a ball far, hard, and straight. So Ashland University and a bunch of other schools liked it. And I picked Ashland because it was a good academic school. I would have redshirted, which I did, and I got to start and play for 4 years, which is why I got to really put those numbers up. And they had an interesting forensic toxicology major, and I was interested in science early on. So I thought I was going to do that and be like a CSI person, but that didn't work out. But football was fun, did 4 years. I left with a chemistry major and a molecular cellular biology major. I doubled because I redshirted. It gave me a little extra time and a free education. And then I did the free agency for a year. So I actually tried it in the NFL. The Bears said, if you go down, you're our next guy. And then I got med school after that. So that was
awesome. What a great story. I love that.
And I was a place kicker. Yeah, that's what I did. I was a place kicker.
Yeah, I mean, as a leading scorer, that makes a lot of sense. You're out there, especially if you can actually get it between the uprights. But as a New England Patriots fan, we've had some of the greatest field goals in the history of the game to win Super Bowls, and we've had some great field goal kickers. So definitely a position that we admire for sure. So, but that's pretty cool. So you had a chance to play for the Bears. It was the free agency, and somebody didn't get injured in time for you to get going, and so you off to medical school you go.
Yeah, that was the fallback, man. I had to go to med school. I had to do something. So
your side hustle was medical school.
So went to Case Western in Cleveland. Still kept it in Ohio. It was a great school. And when I was there, I had some great orthopedic surgeons. I got to follow at the Cleveland Clinic as well at university hospitals, and that's where I initially just found my affinity. It kind of found me, and that's what I enjoyed the most.
So you got the old farm days at the farm back home when you're growing up. You're building stuff. You then do football and that process, and that's sort of a natural process to bring you to orthopedic surgery. So you get through Case Western. You also get a master's as well, and then it's off to you're making a big move here. You went from Ohio and you made it all the way over to Michigan. That must have been really stressful for you.
Well, I didn't get gangster enough in Cleveland, so I had to go to Detroit. So
I love it. So off to Beaumont to the residency program in Michigan. And we just had Michael Wider on 2 weeks ago, so his episode is going to be on pretty good. So Michael had to have been there during your residency as well, right? Must be one of your mentors.
Exactly. So these days, I'm kind of known as the shoulder guy. I do like 80-90% shoulder. A big part of my open total shoulder was being underneath and learning from Mike Wyatter for like 5 years. It's a mini fellowship. And he was my total shoulder guy that really molded me. And then on the other side of things, on the sports side, Dr. Kyle Anderson, who is the head Detroit Lions doc, who kind of took me under his wing. So I got, I had many, many mentors there, but those two really stick out. So you got to tell Wider I said hi, and I got to jump on here too.
No, I love it, dude. You guys are alumni together. You're pretty close. How about the American Pharaoh, Sharif Bachet? But he was in town, but wasn't really part of that residency, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he wasn't linked, and I'm good friends with him now, but I didn't get to meet him till down the road, unfortunately. But my wife, who's a nurse practitioner, is from that area. We're going back to visit Michigan in the middle of August, and me and Sharif got some golf to play and some drinks to share. So I'll be seeing him then.
No, I love it. I love it. One of our major Detroit players that we love on the Ortho Show, for sure. All right, so basically, you got the bug. You're getting some really great treatment for sports medicine and your shoulder in your residency, and then it's off to San Diego for your fellowship. Tell us about the fellowship.
Fellowship was Kaiser San Diego. Obviously not a bad spot to land after putting in the time in the Midwest. So that was a nice appeal. And what I really liked about this fellowship was it was a hybrid. It almost like you had your own practice. So at Kaiser, you had great sports mentors. Anshu Singh's out there is a big shoulder guy, Ned Young, Don Fithian, all these really good guys. Great names, great mentors. But when you show up, you start building up your own patients in your own clinic. And then when you would book patients, you would start booking patients underneath your mentors. And then it got to the point once they saw your, skills in the OR and your capability and your decision-making, you eventually would go off and you're essentially running your own office in a sense. So it was much different than a lot of other fellowships. When I jumped out into the real world, I was ready for it. I wasn't scared at all. It felt like I was already taking care of patients, running my own office for the last year. So it was great. And San Diego doesn't suck. So that's kind of where I got the California bug too. So
Yeah, our oldest is in Carlsbad, so we try to get out there as often as we can. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, for no doubt. I'm actually coming out to La Jolla for a wedding coming up in the fall as well. And I mean, I love the whole mentality of the Kaiser Permanente system is really incredibly unique. Ron Navarro is a dear friend, and Nima and Rafi, and just some really tremendous orthopedic surgeons in that system. But what I really love about the system is it allows you to really become a super specialist very quickly, right? They dial it in for you early on in your practice. You're doing exactly what you want. So I think it's fascinating to hear about that fellowship in the way in which they allowed you to get your reps early on, get your confidence, in the operating room, because as soon as you're done your fellowship, I can still remember 30 years ago doing my first knee scope as an attending, just sitting there saying,
yeah.
"Oh my God, here we go!" Right? It's like, so the more prepared you are, the better you are. So all right. So now you finally broke out of the Midwest. You have a great year down in San Diego with a tremendous fellowship, and all of a sudden you're going to North Carolina. Now, when did you get married? How's your wife in the process of all of this? When was that? When did that happen? Early on in training, or was it already later on?
Yeah, so it was marriage, end of residency. It was typical Grey's Anatomy doctor. I saw this smoking hot, girl in the ICU taking care of the patients. So it was a hospital love story, as many of us have. We got married at the end of residency, and all of her family is in Michigan, and she kind of was a homebody, and she really hasn't seen the United States. And I knew early on I kind of wanted to be out west, but she always wanted to stay close to family. So as I was driving out to fellowship, I signed a contract with Carolina Health System in North Carolina outside of Boone before I even got to California with her. And then when she gets out there, she's like, "Oh yeah, this is awesome. I love it." I'm like, "Well, I told you, but we already signed in North Carolina." So I blame her for North Carolina 2 years, but it was a great experience in North Carolina. It was very rural. If you ever seen the movie Doc Hollywood, that's kind of how I felt like it was. It was kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was me and one other generalist orthopedic surgeon that was taking care of a huge number of rural patients right on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So it was gorgeous. That's
a great breeding ground, right? To be able to be the man, right? There wasn't a lot of other going on. And this is in the Appalachians at this point, if I'm not mistaken, in Boone. So it's, like you said, these people really wanted and needed healthcare, and they'd have to drive a little bit of a ways to come and get you, I'm sure. But how long were you there for?
We were there 2 years. And what it was, once you have that California bug, it's hard to not want to live out there. And even during my North Carolina days, I still had a couple, programs that kept trying to recruit me in and say, "We would love to have you come join us." So I finally took one up on their offer and got my butt out to Santa Barbara. So once I had that offer for the show, there we go.
Who lands a job in Santa Barbara? Let's walk through this, okay? You're in the Appalachians of North Carolina, right? I mean, it's one of the most sought after places on the planet. If anybody that hasn't been to Santa Barbara, you should go. It's gorgeous. No big. They called me and I went out to Santa Barbara 2 years later. So you got to walk us through that, because that had to have been a very sought after position. And tell us how you landed that job.
So it's interesting, and there was a spine surgeon who had a very large practice out here, and he did a lot of work comp, a lot of med legal work, and he was looking for an orthopedic surgeon, and word got out to him that I was kind of looking to come back to California, and he kind of researched me. At the same time, I was also kind of looking to go back to Kaiser in San Diego. So I was juggling two different positions, and I just picked Santa Barbara. So when I got out here underneath that spine surgeon, it was another W-2 position, which is something that's interesting where people are going to land these days, W-2s or private. But it was a lot more work comp and med legal, and financially there were things promised that didn't exactly come to fruition. So even though I was out in Santa Barbara, it still wasn't the perfect job. And I had a couple other guys say, Pipe, come join our practice. So that was my last and final move. So that happened about 4 or 5 years ago, I think 5 years ago. So I jumped in a group with 3 other guys. We're all independent in the eyes of the government. We all get to kind of do our own thing and share overhead. So that's where I'm at now.
No, that's great. So for our young listeners that are out there, I think this is really important for them to hear, because nowadays, there's a lot of movement. When I was growing up and just coming out of fellowship, more often than not, most people stayed with their job. But nowadays, there's more opportunity, there's more communication, and people are willing to make the move. So it's interesting. You go out to Santa Barbara. It turns out it's not exactly what you were hoping, but you got your foot in the door. You got to meet some colleagues. You got to meet some other people, and they're like, "Hey, dude, you're a nice guy. Come on in and join us in practice." And there you are, and you never look back, which is great. And there, there's some competition out there. Professor Rick Ryu, although for the rumor mill is that I think Rick is retiring, so maybe you're going to be getting even a little bit more busy. Not that you need it anymore, but it sounds like that may be the case. But so tell us about the life in Santa Barbara, dude. Come on, man. How good is it out there?
Oh man, so life in Santa Barbara. So I literally grew up in the snow belt of Northern Ohio. So every day I pinch myself that I'm here, and I'm just fortunate enough to live here. So it's a small town, 100,000 people. It's literally ocean town and mountains. I can get to one end of the town to the other as long as there's no traffic, and normally under 15 minutes. Close knit. It's an interesting breakdown because being that there's a lot of wealth here, it tends to be just everything's really nice. Nice restaurants, nice schools. The schools are great. Very outdoorsy. We got the mountains right behind us, the ocean right there. And then I kind of live on a road where if you go up into the mountains, you're in around 330 wineries at this point and ranches. So it's kind of the California Wild West, a lot of cowboys with nice restaurants and food all snuggled into one. And it's not that big of a town, which I really like coming from a farm boy from Ohio. I don't have the affinity to large cities for long periods of time.
Yeah, and the weather sucks. Sorry to hear about that, but somebody's got to get through it. But no, it was one of our favorite towns. I did my fellowship at Curlin Job, and on weekends we would just get in the car and we would go to a different place in California every weekend. In Santa Barbara and the San Ynez Valley and all those wineries in the back are just really a special place, for sure. So good for you. And then, you probably have some issues with Prince Harry and Meghan every once in a while, causing some traffic in that world. But I'm sure you're getting by. I'm sure they'll be knocking on the door for a consult for some PRP any day now, for sure.
My only issue so far is Megan was behind my wife in a store, and my wife's looking at some boots that were way too expensive. And Megan walks up and goes, "Oh, I love those boots. I have them myself." So my wife looks at them. She's like, "Oh, thanks." Trying them on. She's like, "Oh, yeah, they look great on you." So, of course, she says she has to buy the boots. So that was my only issue so far, is the influence on my wife's spending habits. Otherwise, they've been very well accepted in the community. There's so many influential celebrity people here that no one really bugs them. It's kind of a nice little haven, and it's like take the fame of LA, but people that don't want to live in LA, so they kind of live around here.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's the price of doing business in Santa Barbara, brother.
That's
you got to pay for the boots.
Sunshine tax.
I'm sure your wife's very happy. All right, so let's talk some orthopedics. Regenerative medicine. I know that's one of your passions. So let's talk a little bit about how you use that in your clinical practice. What are you using? PRP, platelet-rich plasma? You doing some bone marrow aspirate? Are you doing lipogems? What's your regenerative medicine du jour that you're using routinely, and how are you using it?
Yeah. So, and I'm very, I love to do research, make sure what I'm doing for my patients works. So at this point within my office itself, I do a lot of PRP for arthritis, leukocyte poor. I'll do tendinopathies. I'll do injections for tendinitis, mainly PRP in the office. I do a lot of BMAC, bone marrow aspirate concentrate, more within surgery. So if I'm going to repair a rotator cuff and the patient elects for it, I'll do BMAC. I'll kind of inject it into the interface, coat it. So my great analogy is, I think it's great anyway, is I say PRP is little bags of growth factors. Think of fertilizer for the garden. And depending on what your condition is, I try and help it grow, or I try and keep inflammation down. And for arthritis, I say it keeps the fishbowl clean for a long period of time. It doesn't let the fire of inflammation get as big. And then I'll say, well, you got fertilizer for the garden, extra fertilizer, but then say I'm trying to repair a rotator cuff back down or heal something. I think BMAC is extra seeds for the garden. They're kind of the extra seeds, the quarterbacks. They help with all the cellular pathways. And research is starting to show if you, do BMAC within a rotator cuff repair, there's been a few studies the last years, faster return to work, sports, less pain, up to a year. And then after a year, it kind of peters off. But I mean, I can quote that stuff all day, but biologics, I think they're very powerful. And the only downside is the wallet, it's cash only. We don't get reimbursed for it. So we'll see where that goes in time. Fortunately, I'm in an area that people are willing to pay for biologics. So it's worked out well for me and my practice.
Well, I got good news for you, because now next time my mother tells me that she has shoulder pain, I'm flying her out to Santa Barbara to see you. Because Matthew, that was one of the best explanations that my mother can understand about PRP and BMAC. So well done. We appreciate that. And it's funny, when it comes to rotator cuffs, I'm a firm believer as well, right? It's not rotator cuff tears are not just a mechanical problem. It is also a biologic problem. And at the end of the day, if we want to improve our outcomes, get patients to have better results, get these rotator cuffs to heal. Remember, the rotator cuff is attached to a patient, so we do care about the patient experience. We need to work on the mechanical side as well as the biologic side. And whether that's BMAC or a new pharmacologic agent that may come out that might be able to eventually have a CPT code that we can use for insurance, whether that's an implant of some sort, a collagen implant, or a synthetic implant some people are using. So lots of options and ways to do it, but I like that explanation, sort of dialing it down so people can understand it. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be patient pay for a long time, despite the fact that there's more and more science coming out, thanks to Don Buford and Scott Bruder and the people that are really out there helping to police this world, but also to help generate the research that's necessary. I think more and more information is heading us in that direction. So yeah, big fan of going as far as the biologic process as well. I'm more of a PRP guy. I'm not in the midst right now of digging big holes into people's pelvis. I probably should, but I'll leave that to the younger guys for now, for sure. So yeah. Great story. So I like that a lot. So let's talk about another thing that you and I have in common. And obviously, as we talked at the beginning of the show, you have a great sense of social media because you recognize the greatness of the Ortho Show and gave us a slide in your talk.
Of course.
But, but I think it's important, right? I mean, tell me how you use social media in your clinical practice, because I think a lot of the, our senior doctors are still sort of wary of that approach, but yet obviously the younger docs and the younger generation use it routinely.
Yeah. So I when I approach someone and talking initially about social media, I always like to comment that these days, when a patient is looking for a doctor, they will go online. 75% of patients will pick one doctor, me, Matthew Pifer, over the awesome Scott Sigman, not only based on reputation, but our social media and online presence. So that's a powerful tool. And I also know that, say a primary care doctor says, go see Scott. He's going to rock your ACL tear. He's a great surgeon. That patient, 95% of the time, will look you up on the internet first to see what you're all about. So when I start off with social media, I say that, you don't have to be what's called an influencer and have millions of followers and make a lot of money off it. You don't have to have people following you around with cameras or take funny pictures out in public, stopping traffic. And you can if you want, and it's not going to hurt you, but you just need a baseline internet social media presence. And to that effect is when someone goes on to Google you, what's going to show up is if you have a Google business page, if you have your own website, who you're affiliated with. And then you start throwing on like an Instagram, a TikTok, a Twitter, a Doximity, just so the patients know that you're out there, someone's commenting on you. And that right there will get you patients in this day and age of where we're at. So I think that's a good baseline. Some people kick it up and do those things where they try and get thousands of followers. Some people have amazing podcasts, not to get patients, but it's just kind of what they do. So if you do something cool like that, or you're passionate about taking pictures, put it on there. It's only going to help you, man. So that's what I start off with, to say the least.
Yeah, I think it's very articulate, very well done, and a big believer. I mean, I think that, and you don't. And when I said, the senior guys may not be using social media, a lot of people do. Joe Abood is wonderful, with his social media process, and it just depends on what you want to do, and then you develop whatever brand you want to be, right? Whether you said maybe it's a podcast, maybe you want to educate patients, maybe you want to talk about the latest literature that's out there, but. Like, I had a 70-year-old woman walk into my office just yesterday and say, yeah, I was referred by a friend and I went online and I Googled you and I know all this stuff that you're doing and I want you to do my surgery. So it's like literally the conversation and the relationship is started before the patient even walks in the door, so that your ideal patient can literally be sitting there waiting for you as you open the door, knowing they're there because they want to see you. How cool is that?
That's cool, man. It's powerful too. And it empowers them, because I love, personally, if you're one of my patients, the second you walk in, I want to educate you at whatever level you want educated at, so you understand what's going on with you. So you walk in with a rotator cuff tear, I'm going to talk about how rotator cuff goes around the humeral head. It keeps the ball centered. If you tear it and it's full tear, it's only going to get worse. And over time, you may get rotator cuff arthropathy, and I may have to do a total shoulder on you, which I don't want to do. I want to catch the rotator cuff nice and early, and that's why full thickness tears should be fixed, kind of a sense. So, I do my best to educate. And when they walk in and they already know, yeah, like I got a tear, it's supraspinatus, it's full thickness, Dr. Pifer, should I fix it? If not, what should I do? They're just on a different level these days when they walk in, and it makes it more efficient and a better level of understanding. So I actually prefer a well-educated patient.
No, that's great. I mean, I think I can just sense, one of your superpowers is your ability to communicate to patients in a way that they can understand and listen, put it to a way in which it really makes sense for them, talking equal, in a way. And I think you've done that very well, even on the episode today. Just listening to you. So, look, we're going to close pretty soon here, but what advice would you give? Because, I look at you and you found a successful career path that took you 3 times to sort of get to where you truly wanted to be. What advice would you give to our medical students and young residents out there that are seeking a job as to what they can do to try and make it right, maybe the first time?
Yeah. So, I think your specialty will find you. You may think you want one thing. I think I switched 3 or 4 times from plastics to spine to sports to shoulder. I think it finds you. Don't worry about that too much. As far as going where you want to go, kind of pick locations. And then these days, and this is a whole separate talk, is I think in the future, you're going to be a W-2 employee. You're going to be independent, and that's going to be the minority. I'm very passionate about the business side of medicine. I've got LLC startups. I do a bunch of random things to make it so I have a much easier lifestyle taking care of patients and not as financially stressed by getting into the business side of medicine too. So actually, when someone walks in, like we have UC Santa Barbara, I have all my scribes from there, like, Pifer, what do I need to know now as an undergrad? And the first thing I tell them is start reading about finances. Go to like the white coat investor, start learning about money, learn about your loans, learn about starting an LLC, independent contracting, because they're going to teach you everything about science and medicine. And the one thing that we don't get a lot, unfortunately, is how to survive the real world with rising costs, 30% deduction in our reimbursement in the last 20 years. The burnout of surgeons, doctors, medicine, and the stress we associate normally isn't with patients or technology. We got that dialed in. It's getting reimbursed for it and surviving and putting, almost food on the table in some instances. So that's my normal advice. It's, let the medicine, the science guide you, but hone in on the finances in life, and you'll be much happier and less burnt out. So
Great advice. I think that, we're asked to do more every day, right? Press more buttons. And it seems like every day we're finding out that we're going to get reimbursed less. So having the side hustles, if you will, whether it's with, industry or medical device design, or whether it's legal work that you can do on the side as well. But there's a lot of ways that you're owning a surgery center or being a part of different businesses, I think, is a great way to augment your income and take some of the stress away from the clinical practice of medicine. So I think that's really, terrific advice. Matt, this was awesome. This is a breath of fresh air to have a young buck orthopedic surgeon 10 years into his practice who's really doing quite well, successful in a great environment. I love the way in which you approach medicine, the way in which you communicate with your patients, the way that you're staying abreast of the latest technologies and being a part of societies and communities as we saw each other at Shoulder 360. And so really well done. It's been a pleasure having you on, brother.
Thanks, man. I'm just happy to be here. It's great to get to know you, and we get to continue to associate at all the meetings and conferences. And I look forward to more great conversations like these as we go.
Absolutely. You are now officially an Ortho Show alumni, Matthew Pifer, Santa Barbara, California.
Bam.
This is Dr. Scott. There you got it, brother. This is Dr. Scott Sigman, #FollowTheFro, host of the Ortho Show. Until next time.